Fabian quietly asked the man whether he had already eaten his meal. Frozen with fear, the man quickly nodded and said yes. Fabian then asked if he noticed anything strange. The man blinked in confusion before admitting that his head was suddenly starting to spin. Seconds later, he collapsed to the floor unconscious. One by one, the other men sitting at the tables began experiencing the same strange sensation. Victor calmly commented that to avoid suspicion, he would also take one of the sleeping pills. After all, he intended to support his boss completely. Fabian looked around the room and calmly declared that it was now time for them to surrender to the police. Victor felt terrified hearing those words, but he convinced himself that Fabian must still be testing his loyalty. Just then, a police officer quietly approached Victor from behind and pressed a gun against the back of his head. The officer announced that they had received information that a criminal act would take place there that night. They had also received a confession call from a member of the organization. Fabian calmly raised his hand and said that he was the one who had made the call. He explained that he had deliberately gathered all the company members there so that they could surrender together. After that, he planned to hand over the evidence of all their crimes. Pointing to a large box filled with computers, Fabian added that all the incriminating data about their organization was stored inside. The police quickly confirmed that the evidence was real. Still, they couldn't understand why Fabian had suddenly decided to expose everything himself. Later, as they sat inside the police car, Victor nervously asked Fabian whether this had all been another test of loyalty. Nearby, a young police officer looked at Santiago, who was lying unconscious on the ground, and quietly remarked that it seemed their boss had finally developed a conscience. The officer looked at the unconscious group and quietly made a decision. It was obvious that someone had deliberately put everyone to sleep, and he refused to believe that the situation was simply the result of a madman losing his mind. There had to be a deeper reason behind what Fabian had done. Just then, a senior officer walked over and calmly asked him to begin collecting statements from the restaurant staff. He said he would personally take responsibility for dealing with Fabian and the rest of the situation. The senior officer then leaned closer to Santiago, who was still lying nearby, and quietly told him that the gang had finally been captured. He praised Santiago for his incredible dedication and the excellent work he had done during the long undercover mission. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Daryl and the Eighth Authority were celebrating. They hosted a lavish banquet of their own, raising glasses to what they believed was Fabian's downfall. In their minds, Fabian had destroyed himself by handing over his entire organization. Without him standing in their way anymore, they believed the entire criminal underworld of the city would soon fall under their control. Excited by the opportunity, the two men began discussing how they would divide up Fabian's territories and business interests between themselves. However, their celebration was suddenly interrupted. The doors of the house burst open as a group of police officers rushed inside. The officers immediately raised their weapons and ordered everyone in the room to put their hands up. The atmosphere of celebration instantly turned into one of fear and confusion. It soon became clear why the police had arrived. The computer files Fabian had turned over contained detailed evidence linking Daryl and even the Eighth Authority to numerous serious crimes. The officers also explained that the same computer contained records exposing several other criminals who had been secretly operating throughout the city. Daryl was completely stunned by this turn of events. He could not believe that Fabian had betrayed them so thoroughly. As he sat under police guard, he cursed Fabian loudly and angrily, swearing revenge on him and even on his descendants. Before long, Fabian and all the members of his organization were brought before the court. After reviewing the overwhelming evidence, the judge announced the verdict. Daryl, the leader of the criminal network, was sentenced to death due to the severity of his crimes. Fabian himself was also found guilty of serious offenses. However, because he had actively helped expose the organization and had voluntarily confessed, the court gave him a death sentence with a reprieve. Meanwhile, Santiago's long mission had finally reached its end. One of his colleagues congratulated him, saying that thanks to his efforts, the criminal forces that had plagued the city for years could finally be dismantled. Santiago then asked when he could finally return to his normal life now that the mission was finished. His colleague replied that there was still one more task left. They needed someone to monitor Fabian's case until the sentence was fully carried out. The authorities felt Fabian's confession was suspicious. They feared he might still be hiding something or working with unseen allies. So someone needed to follow him into prison and observe his actions closely. The officer admitted that asking Santiago to continue undercover was extremely cruel. Life in disguise required strong nerves, acting ability, and constant alertness because even a single mistake could cost someone their life. But despite everything he had already endured, Santiago agreed to continue watching Fabian for the sake of the city and its people. The officer then added that during Fabian's imprisonment, he himself would be the only person Santiago would be allowed to contact directly. Santiago nodded firmly and said that if justice and public safety required it, he was ready to sacrifice even more of his own life. Sometime later, Fabian and the remaining members of his group were transferred to prison. During an interview broadcast on television, Fabian openly admitted that he had drugged everyone and turned them in to the police. He explained that his only intention had been to help them become better people. After all, the director had once told him that every human being had some goodness hidden inside them. Soon after arriving in prison, Fabian gathered his former subordinates together and spoke calmly. He said he understood their anger, but they didn't need to thank him because he was also glad they now had a chance to change their lives. Watching all of this, Santiago suspected that the prison warden might have intentionally placed Fabian together with the men he had betrayed. If Fabian ended up dying in prison, Santiago's undercover mission would finally be over. Meanwhile, the prisoners secretly began discussing their revenge. They agreed that they would act when the time came for them to perform their daily labor. When the day arrived, several of them quietly grabbed metal spoons and concealed them in their hands as makeshift weapons before heading out into the prison yard. Two guards watched carefully as the prisoners worked in the small garden area outside the cell blocks. Santiago noticed the suspicious behavior and wondered if he should alert the guards. He had a strong feeling that the men were planning to kill Fabian. Just then, Fabian casually stood up from where he had been working and called out to Victor, asking him to come over and help take care of the plants. At that very moment, one of the prisoners suddenly jumped up from behind and swung his spoon like a dagger, aiming directly at Fabian's back. Victor instantly shouted a warning, telling his boss to dodge the attack immediately. Even after being sentenced to life in prison, Victor's loyalty had never wavered. Without hesitation, he rushed forward to defend Fabian. But before Victor could reach him, another man stepped in front of Fabian. It was the same worker whose mother had once been saved by Fabian. He declared that no one would harm the boss while he was still standing there. Victor joined him and said firmly that no matter what hardships or punishments they faced, their loyalty to Fabian would never change. The other prisoners glared at them angrily, frustrated that their first attack had failed. Soon the fight broke out. Several inmates rushed forward at once, surrounding Fabian and his supporters. The guards quickly noticed the chaos and ran toward them. The attackers charged again, determined to kill Fabian before the guards could stop them. Victor prepared to defend his master, but Fabian stepped forward himself. With a single swift movement of his arm, he sent the attacker flying straight into a muddy puddle. Fabian calmly suggested that continuing the fight might only lead to someone getting seriously hurt. He recommended that everyone simply calm down and separate peacefully. In truth, though, Fabian looked almost amused. It seemed like he wouldn't have minded playing with them a little longer. When the other prisoners saw how effortlessly Fabian had defeated their strongest attacker, they quickly fell to their knees and apologized, promising they would never try something like that again. 3 years passed after that incident. During that time, Fabian carefully saved the small allowances he earned from prison labor and eventually asked for the money to be sent to an orphanage. He explained that the money was everything he had saved during those 3 years. Since he truly wanted to walk the right path now, he hoped the funds could help support children in need. Seeing this, the other prisoners also reluctantly offered the money they had been saving for years. They handed it over with trembling hands, though it was obvious from their expressions that the decision was not entirely voluntary. Fabian then turned his attention to Santiago, who was the only person still holding onto his savings. Santiago had planned to use the money to buy food for the dog and cat he hoped to reunite with someday. Fabian's followers immediately surrounded Santiago and questioned why he was ignoring the boss's wishes. After a moment of hesitation, Santiago sighed and handed over his envelope as well, saying that he too wanted to become a better person. Fabian looked around at the group and felt hopeful. If everyone here had truly changed for the better, then maybe his mission had succeeded. Perhaps this would finally allow him to return and save his friend Jasper. However, another 3 years passed, and he still found himself trapped in this body without any sign that he could return to his original world. Eventually, Santiago managed to build a normal life again. He found a girlfriend, adopted both a dog and a cat, and met with his old partner who thanked him for his years of service to their country. The partner explained that the department had completed a full investigation. Fabian had made no attempts to contact the outside world for years, suggesting that either he had truly accepted his fate or no one remained willing to help him. After spending so many years observing Fabian, Santiago began to believe that the man might simply have been mentally unstable rather than truly evil. His partner laughed at the idea, joking that after spending so long inside prisons and criminal circles, Santiago had probably started seeing things differently. 60 years passed after those events. At last, the day came when Fabian would be released from prison. Journalists gathered outside the gates, eager to witness the legendary moment. As the 90-year-old former crime boss slowly stepped outside, a young woman rushed toward him. She thanked him on behalf of the orphanage for all the help he had continued to provide over the years. Fabian quietly turned to the system in his mind and said that the girl had just called him a good person. In his opinion, that alone should be enough reason for him to return to his original world. The system responded that although Fabian's personality might never completely change and he could still fall back into darkness, his life was now reaching its natural end. Because of that, Levi was finally allowed to return. The system then calmly announced that the transfer back to his original world would begin in 3 seconds. As a reward for completing the mission, the protagonist also gained a new ability, the power to control the sacred flames of the fire deity. The system then asked a final question. Should he use this newly gained power to destroy the ice coffin and escape from it? Without pausing to think or showing even a hint of hesitation, the main character immediately decided to activate the brand new skill he had just obtained, trusting his instincts and hoping this power would finally turn the desperate situation around. Only a heartbeat later, a blazing flash of fire suddenly erupted, cutting through the thick ice coffin like a spear of light and cracking the frozen prison from the inside. The Storm Lord could only stare in stunned disbelief as Levi, who had been trapped inside that frozen coffin moments ago, burst out of it completely. His entire body was now surrounded by roaring flames, like a warrior reborn from a furnace. The demon stood there in confusion, completely unable to understand what was unfolding before his eyes, because in all his years he had never once witnessed such terrifying power. But before the demon even had a chance to gather his thoughts or react properly, he suddenly realized something horrifying. The massive pillar of flame was already rushing straight toward him. Unfortunately for the demon, he had almost no strength left to resist. The raging fire swallowed him instantly, and within seconds he was burned alive without any chance to escape. The rooster watched the entire scene with wide eyes full of horror as the 10th-rank demon was completely incinerated in the blink of an eye, leaving nothing but burning embers behind. Then the rooster slowly turned his head and saw the protagonist walking out of the fading flames, calmly holding his injured friend in his arms, as if nothing unusual had just happened. At first, Jasper looked confused and couldn't quite recognize who was standing in front of him. Then the rooster hurriedly explained that he was actually their pet and begged them not to attack him. The boys looked at the chicken with puzzled expressions, whispering among themselves about why this rooster didn't have breasts at all, especially since the director had once insisted that female birds should obviously have them. Jasper then tilted his head curiously and asked the demon rooster a very serious question, whether he was still capable of laying eggs for them like before. Hearing that question instantly reminded the rooster of a terrifying memory. He remembered the day Levi warned him that if he ever stopped laying eggs, they would simply turn him into chicken soup. With that thought in mind, he hurriedly nodded and said yes. Meanwhile, far away from the battlefield, Dad finally managed to return to his original body after being separated from it for many long years. He slowly looked around the unfamiliar surroundings and immediately began asking where he was and what had happened to the girls they had captured earlier. Without wasting time, he called his bodyguard Victor over and demanded to know who the two strange old men nearby were. However, the moment he spoke, he suddenly noticed something strange. His voice sounded incredibly hoarse and rough, far older than he remembered. Victor stepped forward respectfully and told him that if it were possible, he would gladly serve his boss for the rest of his life. But Fabian stared at him in confusion, unable to understand why such an elderly man was standing in front of him. Slowly, Fabian looked down at his own trembling hands. Then he touched his face carefully, feeling the deep wrinkles. Panic filled his eyes as he urgently asked what year it was. The young girl standing nearby calmly replied that the current year was 2080. Hearing that number made Fabian freeze in place as he realized that 66 full years had passed. The girl gently explained that although Grandpa Fabian had done many terrible things in the past, over time he had actually become a much better person. Fabian couldn't understand any of it. How could 66 years disappear in the blink of an eye? And why was he suddenly being told he had become a good person? The confusion overwhelmed his mind, and his vision slowly began to fade. Because he was already extremely old, the shock proved too much for his fragile body. Moments later, he collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Sometime later, a quiet funeral ceremony was held for him, and they placed a portrait of Fabian from his younger days beside the coffin. Victor walked at the front of the funeral procession, solemnly telling everyone that although Fabian had never left behind any descendants, he would forever remain their respected boss. Meanwhile, back in the protagonist's world, the rooster had already transformed back into his normal chicken form and obediently hopped straight into Levi's arms. Jasper then turned toward the injured squad members and calmly told them that he was going to try out his brand new healing technique on them. At that moment, he noticed Elsa is still kneeling on the ground, crying over her supposedly dead pet Smudge. Jasper gently asked if she wanted help. Levi reassured her that Jasper was a master of acupuncture and could be trusted. After a short while, Smudge's entire face ended up covered with dozens of tiny acupuncture needles carefully placed by Jasper. Then, to everyone's complete surprise, the demon suddenly opened his eyes again as if waking from a deep sleep. Elsa immediately burst into tears of happiness when she realized her beloved pet was alive again. But right at that moment, the system quietly informed the protagonist that there was high-energy food standing right in front of him. The protagonist slowly turned to his friend and asked what he thought about that idea. However, Jasper quickly stopped him and said Smudge wasn't nearly cute or attractive enough to be eaten. After that brief discussion, they shifted their attention back to the other squad members. Even though Jasper had already used his acupuncture technique, the boys still hadn't regained consciousness yet. Jasper explained that the intense heat from the flames that had burned them earlier was simply too powerful, so he wasn't sure if he could fully help them. Hearing that, Levi quietly blamed himself for what happened. Jasper quickly reassured him and said there was no reason to blame himself because everyone knew Levi hadn't meant to hurt anyone. He just couldn't control the overwhelming strength of his flames yet. He also reminded Levi that even if those particular soldiers couldn't be saved immediately, Levi had grown far stronger now and would surely be able to protect many more people in the future. Because of that, Jasper suggested they should keep moving forward and continue their mission. After some time passed, the squad members finally woke up and were shocked to discover that their wounds had already healed. They were absolutely stunned, because they knew that normally injuries caused by a 9th-ranked demon could only be treated by a 10th-ranked doctor or someone with national-level medical skill. Soon they realized that the healing must have been done by those two mysterious newcomers and their strange pet. August commented that even though they hadn't seen the second man fight yet, the squad was clearly very powerful. In the end, every squad member reached the same conclusion. Those two men were truly masters at what they did, and with their help they might finally be able to defend the city against the demons. They soon noticed that the two newcomers had already rushed off to help others elsewhere. Realizing this, the squad decided they shouldn't waste time either and needed to contact headquarters immediately. However, Lexi suddenly reported that doing that would be impossible because all communication lines had already been completely cut off. This alarming discovery made them wonder if something terrible had already happened at the Central Monitoring and Control Center. At this point, the story shifts back in time to headquarters, about 1 hour before the chaos outside began. Inside the control center, workers were extremely busy analyzing countless signals pouring in from every corner of the city. Because everyone was so focused on their tasks, no one noticed the small demonic cockroach slowly crawling along the wall nearby. Suddenly, Tracy noticed one of the technicians trembling violently at his station, clearly terrified by something he had just seen. With a shaking voice, the man reported that their instruments had detected energy waves that were even higher than the 10th rank. He then added that the source of those terrifying waves was coming directly from inside their own headquarters. Hearing that news left Tracy frozen in shock while the rest of the staff began to panic. While everyone was distracted and arguing about what to do, none of them noticed a demonic hand slowly reaching toward one of the workers. In the next instant, the cockroach demon suddenly grabbed the man by the neck and lifted him effortlessly off the ground. A moment later, the creature stabbed its claws straight into the man's neck, causing the other workers to scream and run away in pure terror. Tracy couldn't understand how such a demon had managed to sneak past the highly advanced defense and monitoring system without anyone noticing. She was certain this creature couldn't possibly be mindless. The cockroach demon turned its emotionless eyes toward her and casually hurled the lifeless body of its victim against the wall. After that, it slowly began walking directly toward Tracy, who stood frozen in place, unsure whether to fight or flee. For a brief moment, the girl and the terrifying demon locked eyes across the room. Then the cockroach suddenly lunged forward, clearly intending to attack her without mercy. It swung its powerful leg toward her head, preparing to crush her skull with a single devastating strike. But at that exact moment, a majestic golden dragon suddenly appeared out of nowhere and grabbed the demon firmly by the leg. The unexpected interruption caught the demon completely off guard, giving Tracy just enough time to react. She kicked the creature's leg hard and quickly leaped backward to safety. Even so, the shockwave from the impact was incredibly strong, and Tracy was still thrown violently across the room until she slammed into the wall. Gasping for breath, Tracy realized that if One Eye's heart dragon hadn't appeared at that critical moment, she would almost certainly be dead already. Suddenly, the office door burst open and her Uncle Joseph rushed inside without hesitation. The moment he stepped in, he raised his hand and unleashed a technique known as fingertip sword dance, sending sharp streams of energy slicing directly toward the cockroach demon. But the demon's movements were incredibly swift and precise. It twisted its body with unnatural agility, dodging every single strike as if it had predicted them. Joseph watched grimly as his attack shattered in midair, breaking apart into tiny fading fragments. The cockroach demon slowly turned its head toward Joseph, its eyes cold and calculating. Then a faint, mocking grin spread across its face, clearly amused by the attempt. Joseph, however, showed no sign of backing down. Without wasting even a second, he shifted his stance and immediately launched another elegant, yet deadly sword dance technique. The cockroach demon let out an irritated hiss, clearly annoyed by the persistent attacks, and once again tried to evade the incoming strikes. This time, though, it reacted just a little too late. One of Joseph's sharp projectiles clipped the demon's antenna, slicing them clean off and drawing dark blood from the wound. Joseph let out a low chuckle as he looked at the injured demon and asked with confidence if it really thought that was the full extent of his power. Then he raised both hands and activated another technique, this one called spin dance, preparing an even stronger wave of attacks. The cockroach quickly turned its head and saw a fresh storm of spinning energy shells rushing toward it from every direction. A thunderous blast echoed through the office as the attack landed. Joseph watched closely as pieces of the demon's body were violently torn apart and thrown across the room. When the smoke and dust finally began to settle, everyone in the room saw the demon's body lying there, its head completely severed from its torso. Tracy slowly pushed herself up on her elbows so she could see better, staring at the fallen demon with disbelief. She struggled to accept that such a terrifying enemy might actually be dead. After all, if that creature truly was a national-ranked demon, defeating it shouldn't have been so simple or quick. But she realized her mistake far too late. When she turned her head toward Joseph again, she saw the horrifying truth. The demon was completely unharmed and already swinging its leg toward him. The cockroach activated a skill of its own, firing a blinding laser-like strike that slammed into Joseph's body and hurled him violently through a thick concrete wall. Miraculously, Joseph survived the devastating blow. His ribs were clearly broken and his breathing was shallow, but he was still alive. He stared in confusion and pain, unable to understand how the demon could still be alive when he had clearly severed its head moments earlier. Lying there injured, Joseph wondered grimly how much longer his battered body could continue to hold on. The cockroach demon showed no mercy and immediately rushed toward him again, ready to deliver another lethal strike. In response, Joseph forced himself up and unleashed another technique called Blade Whirlwind. Yet this time the demon moved even faster. It smoothly dodged every projectile from the whirlwind attack, letting the blade slice harmlessly through empty air behind it. In the next instant, the creature had already closed the distance and stood directly in front of Joseph. It raised its leg high, preparing to slice off his head. But right at that critical moment, One Eye crashed down through a hole in the roof of the building. As he landed, he unleashed the Thousand Dragon Seal, demon imprisonment technique. A blazing fire dragon surged forward and wrapped itself tightly around the demon's limbs, locking its movements and preventing the deadly strike. The cockroach looked up with furious eyes, clearly enraged that yet another opponent had interfered with its attack. Without giving it any time to react, One Eye followed up with another technique known as Buddha's Dragon Palm that shatters the world, strengthening the fiery restraints and completely binding the demon's limbs. Then he stepped forward and delivered a crushing blow with terrifying force, ripping one of the demon's arms completely off its body. Immediately afterward, One Eye activated another technique called Great Information of the Five Transformations, sending several blazing beams of power straight toward the trapped demon. The cockroach demon began to panic as it realized it still couldn't move. Meanwhile, the deadly projectiles were racing closer and closer toward it. It screamed loudly while trying to tear free from the restraints, but the fiery shackles held firm. A moment later, every single projectile slammed directly into its body. One Eye and the others watched the explosion carefully, their expressions tense as they waited to see what kind of damage the demon had taken. At that moment, Tracy remembered the conversation she had with One Eye not long ago. She had ordered him to leave the city after headquarters warned about the danger of a national-ranked demon attack. She explained that there were only two possible explanations. Either headquarters didn't believe their report, or they believed it, but deliberately issued that strange order. One Eye had been furious when he heard that decision, completely unable to understand why such an order had been given. Tracy then pointed out that headquarters had still approved their request for another national-rank warrior to replace him. Because of that, she suspected the second possibility was true. The girl even suspected that there was a traitor hiding within headquarters, someone among the four people who had the authority to influence such decisions. Hearing that, One Eye angrily demanded to know what exactly she was planning to do next. After all, if headquarters already knew everything and still gave that order, then it meant they were deliberately sending a national-ranked warrior to his death. One Eye suspected that whoever made that decision definitely wasn't on their side. It was even possible that a tracking device had been secretly planted on him. Tracy calmly explained that they still needed the strength of a national-rank warrior, so One Eye should pretend to follow the order and travel toward the capital. They would wait for the replacement warrior to arrive, and then halfway through the journey One Eye would secretly turn back and rush to defend the city again. But Tracy had another frightening suspicion. She believed that the moment One Eye left the city, the demons would immediately begin their attack. If that happened, it would prove that the demons somehow knew about his departure, meaning information was being exchanged between them and the traitor inside headquarters. And if the demons had access to his movements, then it would only be a matter of time before they discovered the location of their defense center. If that situation came to pass, Tracy and her team would prepare an ambush there. They would trap the demon using One Eye's strongest binding spell and kill it no matter what. At worst, they all understood that they might simply end up dying together in that final battle. One Eye quietly replied that if it came down to just the three of them dying together, then perhaps that outcome would still be better for everyone else. Now, back in the present moment, One Eye watched as Joseph desperately struggled against the terrifying Demon King. Using the last of his strength, Joseph activated one final technique known as five-sword energy transformation. He slowly stretched out his trembling hand, and several powerful bolts of energy burst forth from his palm. The cockroach demon stared in horror as the terrifying waves of sword energy rushed straight toward it. Moments later, lightning wrapped around the demon's body, crackling violently as it screamed in pain. At that exact moment, One Eye looked up toward the sky, where dark clouds were gathering and thunder was beginning to roar. A massive bolt of lightning crashed down onto the roof of the building. Watching this, One Eye realized that they had to finish the demon immediately. Deep down, he truly believed that together they might still have a chance to kill it. Then an enormous lightning strike pierced straight through the cockroach demon's body. Everyone present held their breath in fear, knowing that if it survived this attack, the entire city would be doomed. When the lightning finally faded, they saw the demon's bloody body slowly drop to its knees. There was barely a single unburned spot left on its body. Its entire form had been horribly charred by the overwhelming power of the lightning. Suddenly, Tracy shouted in alarm, reminding everyone that the demon possessed a terrifying regeneration ability and could recover again soon. Before she could even finish speaking, One Eye suddenly felt a chilling presence behind him. He turned his head and saw the demon standing there once again, completely restored. The attack came so suddenly and so fast that One Eye had no time to dodge. The blow struck him directly, sending his body flying violently into the wall. Joseph and Tracy both cried out in panic the moment they saw what had happened. The strike had landed cleanly, and it was obvious that One Eye had taken a devastating hit. The man quickly realized how serious the situation was. Because of his injuries, the protective dome of primordial energy surrounding him could barely block 30% of the incoming damage, and that level of defense was nowhere near enough to withstand another attack. In that moment, something finally clicked in his mind. He suddenly understood the meaning behind the strange drawing Augustus had given him earlier. Even though the drawing had shown only 4 cockroaches, it didn't necessarily mean that 4 was the limit of the demon's ability or power. It dawned on him that the creature might possess an ability far more terrifying, perhaps limitless regeneration. If that was true, then killing it by ordinary means would be nearly impossible. Just then, the cockroach demon leapt forward with terrifying speed, lunging directly toward One Eye as it prepared to deliver a final, fatal strike. But One Eye reacted instantly. Regaining his balance, he rolled away from the incoming attack and slipped behind the demon's back. Refusing to surrender, he prepared to unleash the devastating technique known as world-destroying Buddha Dragon Palm. The cockroach hadn't expected him to reposition so quickly. When it spun around, it saw One Eye's blazing palm already rushing toward its face, the air around it burning with fierce flames. Even so, the demon's reflexes were extraordinary. It twisted aside at the last moment, causing One Eye's fiery palm to miss its target by only a narrow margin. Realizing the fight couldn't be prolonged, the cockroach immediately counterattacked and drove a brutal punch straight into One Eye's stomach. The force of the strike was overwhelming. Blood spilled from the man's mouth instantly, yet even while in agony, he tried desperately to hold the demon's arms in place. Using the last of his strength, he activated the demon confinement technique, attempting to trap the cockroach and prevent it from escaping his grasp. The demon glanced upward uneasily as several fiery dragons began closing in on it, their blazing bodies spiraling through the air. But the cockroach was still incredibly agile. It slipped free from the trap at the last moment and hurled One Eye violently back into the wall. Joseph and Tracy watched the brutal exchange in horror, realizing just how hopelessly uneven this battle had become. Yet even with the odds stacked against him, One Eye refused to give up or retreat from the fight. His entire body trembled from exhaustion and pain, but he still forced himself to stand once more, determined to continue fighting. At that critical moment, Joseph suddenly appeared behind the demon and launched his spin dance technique again. The cockroach didn't anticipate the surprise attack. Every projectile struck directly into its head, and seeing the opening, One Eye immediately rushed forward to follow up with his own technique. For 11 long years, he had defended this city without wavering, and he had no intention of stopping now, even if it meant fighting until his very last breath. Meanwhile, Far away in another part of the city, Levi and Jasper were quietly walking through the streets as evening began to fall and the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon. Suddenly, the rooster sensed an overwhelming demonic aura nearby, power that clearly surpassed the 10th rank. Shocked, it realized that this might actually be the legendary Demon King itself. The rooster immediately thought that if the king had personally arrived here, then this might finally be its perfect chance to escape from Levi and Jasper. Even though the two humans had grown stronger recently, the rooster simply couldn't believe they could ever surpass the power of the Demon King. With that thought, the demon suddenly spread its wings and burst free from the protagonist's hands, flying upward. While still in midair, it transformed smoothly back into its human form and landed lightly on the ground. Then it grabbed Levi's hand and urgently told him that there were people nearby who desperately needed help. At that very moment, the system informed Levi that an extremely high-energy food source was nearby, something capable of satisfying hunger for an entire year. Hearing that, Levi's eyes lit up with excitement, and he rushed forward eagerly. Without hesitation, he lifted his comrades and sprinted toward the direction of the powerful food that promised to fill his stomach for such a long time. Soon they reached the building, and Levi confidently announced that the source was definitely inside. But Jasper looked around and couldn't see anyone who appeared to need help. Then suddenly, a massive explosion echoed from inside the building, making Jasper and the rooster flinch in shock. Only seconds later, one eye came crashing out and landed on the ground, rolling until he stopped right at the boy's feet. Jasper instantly recognized him as the same honorable man who had once trusted them. While the rooster sensed the overwhelming aura of the Demon King nearby, Jasper rushed forward to help, insisting that his acupuncture could save him. But One Eye turned toward them and shouted urgently, ordering them to run away from the area as fast as possible. Before Jasper could even respond, the cockroach demon burst out of the building and dove toward him from above. With brutal force, it kicked Jasper directly in the back, sending the boy flying across the ground. Levi watched in horror as the demon's strike launched his friend through the air with terrifying power. He immediately dashed forward and caught Jasper mid-fall, preventing him from crashing violently onto the ground. When Levi gently lowered him down, he saw blood trickling from Jasper's mouth and realized his friend was in terrible condition. The sight filled Levi with uncontrollable rage, and he instantly decided that he would make the demon pay for hurting his friend. Meanwhile, the rooster secretly celebrated, believing that the arrival of the Demon King meant it would finally be free from Levi and never have to lay eggs again. Levi leaned down and told Jasper to hold on a little longer, promising that he would soon take him to the director who could definitely heal him. Then Levi slowly stood up and fixed his gaze on the cockroach demon standing not far away, his expression filled with deadly intent. In the blink of an eye, he vanished from where he stood and appeared directly beside the demon before it even realized what had happened. With eyes burning in fury, Levi threw a powerful punch straight into the demon's face. The impact was so strong that the cockroach demon was launched through the air like a kicked football. Levi stood there watching where it flew, his expression filled with a terrifying level of anger. Both the rooster and One Eye stared in complete disbelief, struggling to comprehend what they had just witnessed. The cockroach quickly recovered and shot back toward Levi, determined to strike him even harder. Yet Levi remained completely calm as the fist of a national-ranked demon rushed toward his face. Everyone watching the battle found it hard to believe that Levi might actually rival the strength of a national-ranked demon. The cockroach barely had time to realize that its punch had been effortlessly blocked when it saw Levi's own fist rushing toward its face. Levi struck again, delivering an even heavier punch straight into the demon's face. The blow smashed the cockroach into the ground so hard that the earth cracked apart beneath it. Still unwilling to surrender, the cockroach suddenly slipped free from Levi's attack and reappeared behind him. Raising its leg high, it prepared to deliver a devastating kick to Levi's back. But Levi's rage had pushed his senses to their absolute limit, allowing him to detect the demon moving behind him. Dodging the attack smoothly, Levi grabbed the cockroach's leg and slammed it violently into the ground. Then he followed up instantly, driving another powerful punch straight into the demon's stomach. However, Just before the next strike could land, the cockroach activated its teleportation ability and reappeared behind the protagonist once again. The cockroach demon suddenly raised its fist high, preparing to bring it crashing down onto Levi's head with a brutal finishing strike. But Levi moved faster. In a flash, he straightened up and intercepted the demon before the blow could land. Grabbing the creature tightly by the neck, he lifted it completely off the ground as if it weighed nothing. Levi's entire body trembled with rage. His fingers tightened around the demon's throat, squeezing harder and harder as his anger poured into the grip. Then, in the next horrifying moment, the demon's head tore free from its body and fell heavily to the floor, while dark blood burst outward from the severed neck. Watching this scene unfold, the rooster stood frozen in terror. It simply couldn't believe that Levi was supposed to be human. One Eye was just as stunned by what he was witnessing. Slowly, the realization dawned on him that this terrifying demon was not even a real opponent for Levi. The demon kept reviving again and again, using its regeneration ability to return to life and continue attacking. Yet Levi destroyed each new copy as quickly as it appeared. One Eye began to understand the truth of the situation. Even though Levi lacked refined combat techniques, his raw power, defense, and speed were already greater than those of a national-ranked demon. If the cockroach demon didn't possess its terrifying regeneration ability, it would have already died countless times from Levi's overwhelming blows. At that moment, Joseph and Tracy slowly emerged from the ruined building, leaning on each other for support as both of them struggled to stand due to their severe injuries. The instant they saw the battle raging outside, both of them screamed in shock and disbelief. For just a split second, Levi's attention slipped. That tiny opening was all the demon needed to slam a powerful punch straight into Levi's stomach. Levi staggered slightly from the impact and leaned back, taking a moment to steady his breathing. One Eye quickly realized that Levi had already killed the cockroach demon more than 100 times, yet its endless regeneration kept bringing it back again and again. Levi suddenly leapt forward once more, preparing to strike the demon with another powerful attack. The blow landed with immense force, destroying yet another copy of the cockroach. But almost instantly, a fresh version appeared behind Levi, ready to attack again. Seeing this endless cycle, One Eye felt a sinking feeling in his chest and realized that Levi might eventually lose simply because the demon could never truly die. Before Levi could react, the demon struck again and hurled him violently into the wall with a devastating blow. At that moment, a warning suddenly echoed inside Levi's mind. The system informed him that the host's energy reserves were nearly depleted and would become unavailable within 10 seconds. Ignoring the danger, Levi rushed straight toward the demon with reckless determination, gathering every ounce of willpower he had left. He activated the flame control skill, Destroy the Demon, pouring his life force into the attack. The system immediately responded, congratulating him for successfully using the skill and unlocking the first-level coal flame chain, controlled purely by his willpower. Sensing the incoming attack, the cockroach felt genuine danger for the first time. At that moment, the system voice rang again, congratulating Levi for instinctively removing the seal and unlocking the second-tier flame known as Bone Ash Fire. As Levi's attack continued to intensify, the demon's panic grew. Once again, the system announced another breakthrough, unlocking the third-tier power, the demonic original flame. When the terrifying combined flames finally engulfed the demon, it felt something it had never experienced before since becoming a demonic guardian, true fear of death. It soon became clear that Levi had shattered the final seal as well, unleashing the fourth-tier power known as the Earth Flame Explosive Soul. The moment Levi released the final strike, the system warned him that his strength had been completely exhausted and he could no longer use any internal cultivation techniques. The cockroach demon was swallowed by Levi's flames. Strangely, the fire did not burn its physical body, but instead invaded deep into its soul and began destroying it from within. Even though the demon possessed endless regeneration, there was one thing it could never restore. A destroyed soul could never return. The demon was truly dead this time. The rooster, standing nearby with trembling legs, collapsed onto the ground as it realized the overwhelming aura of the great king had completely vanished. As Levi slowly walked past, the rooster felt a terrifying, destructive aura radiating from him like an invisible storm. Shaking uncontrollably with fear, the rooster instinctively reverted back into its ordinary chicken form and stayed completely still while Levi approached Jasper. Suddenly, the system's voice echoed again, leaving Levi confused. It reported that the person in front of him had lost all vital signs. His breathing had stopped and his heart had ceased beating. Levi rushed over and grabbed Jasper, shaking him desperately while calling his name again and again, refusing to believe the system's message that Jasper had died. He remembered the director warning him long ago not to listen to that voice. Yet the system repeated the message coldly in his mind. Jasper was dead, and even his brain waves were rapidly fading. Tears filled Levi's eyes as he ignored the system completely and kept calling Jasper's name, reminding him of their promise to help each other grow and stay friends forever. In Levi's heart, Jasper was someone who would never lie to him and would never break a promise. Looking at Jasper's lifeless body, Levi suddenly remembered his childhood, how the director once held his hand and brought him to a mental hospital, explaining that it would now be his new home. Back then, Levi noticed a strange white-haired young man trying to stab another patient tied to a tree with acupuncture needles, and he curiously asked the director who that person was. The director suddenly shouted angrily, insisting that the people there were not normal. He rushed forward to untie the restrained patient and ordered the staff to take the white-haired youth away. Meanwhile, the boy loudly insisted he was practicing acupuncture and studying the technique of moving into lunar orbit. Those strange words immediately sparked Levi's curiosity. The director later brought Levi to room 666 and told him to come see him if he needed anything. When Levi asked about his mother, the director explained she had gone abroad for work. Seeing the boy alone in such a large room, a nurse quietly asked why Levi had been given a private room when the hospital was already short on beds. Before entering the room, Levi casually asked the director to prepare several cultivation tools for him: a vegetable knife, a welding gun, and an iron hammer. From that day onward, Levi began terrifying the entire hospital with his bizarre training methods, often ending up in intensive care after pushing his body too far. Once he was hospitalized after breaking his leg while attempting to master an iron leg technique. Another time, he nearly died after holding his breath on the toilet during training, causing his heart to temporarily stop. Meanwhile, the white-haired young man wasn't doing any better, constantly performing acupuncture on other patients without permission and sending them to the hospital in critical condition. On one occasion, a patient suffered violent convulsions after becoming the victim of his experimental acupuncture. In another incident, a patient was left partially paralyzed and had to be hospitalized after undergoing his treatment. Eventually, the director decided the young man was far too dangerous and ordered that his legs be chained so he could be locked inside a secure ward. Despite the restraints, Jasper simply smiled innocently and promised he would behave, asking the staff to release him. The director sighed deeply, remarking that Jasper's gentle face made him look like the perfect con artist. Seeing the staff hesitate, the director finally decided to bring in a martial arts expert capable of hypnosis to prevent Jasper from manipulating people. Afterward, the employees were lightly hypnotized so that whenever they looked at Jasper, they would perceive him as a weak and harmless old man. This strange measure ensured they wouldn't fall for Jasper's persuasive tricks ever again. Meanwhile, while guarding Levi outside, two exhausted hospital staff members eventually fell asleep right there in the garden. Inside his locked room, Jasper sat quietly with chains wrapped around his legs. Suddenly, he heard a faint noise near the window. Curious, he looked up and saw Levi standing on a chair outside, peeking in. Their eyes met through the glass, and almost instantly the two strange boys understood each other, as if they had been friends for years. The hospital staff were always interfering, constantly stepping in to stop the two of them from doing whatever they had planned. No matter how quietly or carefully they tried to act, someone from the medical team would appear and shut everything down, leaving them frustrated and unable to continue what they wanted to do. Levi approached Jasper with curiosity and excitement in his eyes, asking if Jasper could teach him the mysterious acupuncture cultivation technique. Jasper's face immediately lit up with joy. He eagerly agreed, explaining that he would gladly guide Levi. Levi responded with a cheerful grin, saying that whenever Jasper practiced acupuncture on him, he could feel something inside his body changing, as if he was slowly growing stronger, and that made him want to learn it himself. Jasper felt deeply pleased after realizing that he had finally found someone willing to let him practice his acupuncture techniques without hesitation. With genuine warmth, he asked Levi to simply call him Jasper from now on. The two of them shared a sincere moment and promised each other that they would remain good friends, always helping one another improve and grow stronger together. When the two guards assigned to keep watch over Levi slowly woke from their brief lapse in attention, they immediately sensed that something was wrong. Their eyes darted around the room in confusion until they realized the terrifying truth: Levi was gone. The truth quickly became clear. While the guards had been distracted, Jasper had already carried out an acupuncture treatment on the boy without anyone noticing. When the hospital staff finally rushed to the scene, they were shocked by what they found. Levi was lying unconscious on the cold floor, completely still, with several acupuncture needles sticking out from his head. The sight was so strange and unsettling that it left everyone speechless for a moment. Meanwhile, Jasper sat quietly alone in his room, deep in thought. After what had happened, he assumed Levi would probably never come looking for him again. The idea lingered in his mind, leaving him feeling a little disappointed. However, after some time had passed, Levi suddenly returned. He stood proudly in front of Jasper, showing that he had already recovered. Not only that, but he said he wanted to continue the acupuncture treatments. To make things easier, Levi had even secretly stolen and brought Jasper a set of acupuncture needles. Seeing Levi appear again filled Jasper with overwhelming happiness. He burst into loud laughter, his mood instantly brightening. With great enthusiasm, he told Levi that the two of them would definitely remain good friends forever. Levi told Jasper that the last time he helped him cultivate using acupuncture, the results felt incredibly effective. Hearing this praise made Jasper extremely happy. Proud that his abilities had been recognized, he promised Levi that he would always continue helping him improve. Levi then described something strange he had experienced. After the 13th needle was inserted during the previous session, he suddenly felt as if he had seen a bridge appear before him. Standing on that bridge was a beautiful woman with flowing white hair, gently waving in his direction. Jasper rubbed the bridge of his nose thoughtfully while listening to Levi's story. After thinking for a moment, he muttered that it seemed his moon bridge transfer technique still required more research and refinement. After finishing the acupuncture session, Levi once again fainted and collapsed. Yet Jasper didn't seem too worried. Instead, he leaned closer and continued asking Levi when he planned to come back for the next treatment. Levi continued visiting Jasper again and again for acupuncture treatments. During one of those visits, Jasper noticed the butterfly-shaped hair clip resting in Levi's hair and admired it openly. Hearing Jasper praise it, Levi casually removed the butterfly clip from his hair and handed it to him. He explained that a nurse had originally given it to him. Even though the clip was pretty, Jasper was his friend, so Levi decided to give it to him as a gift. For Jasper, it was the very first present he had ever received. Jasper happily tied the butterfly clip onto his ponytail and then turned toward Levi with a playful smile, asking him if he looked handsome wearing it. Jasper sincerely thanked Levi for the gift and promised that he would treasure it carefully and never lose it. Holding several acupuncture needles tightly in his hands, Jasper suddenly felt the urge to repay Levi's kindness in his own way. The technique he had been researching, once called the translocation technique, had now been improved into something even more powerful: the soul translocation technique. Jasper was full of excitement and confidence, believing that this upgraded method would definitely help Levi become much stronger. Without wasting any time, Jasper swiftly inserted 3 needles into Levi's head with careful precision. As the technique began to work, Levi felt as if countless galaxies were spinning and swirling around him, creating a dizzying and surreal sensation. However, by the time Jasper inserted the 13th needle, the hospital staff arrived again. They found Levi unconscious once more and quickly carried him away, sending him straight back to the intensive care unit. When the hospital director heard that the staff had failed to properly monitor Levi for the 8th time, he became extremely dissatisfied. The employees complained in exhaustion that there simply were not enough people to maintain strict 24-hour surveillance. The constant stress of watching Levi day and night had become incredibly tiring. The two exhausted guards assigned to watch Jasper's room also spoke up. They explained that even if they lost focus for just a single minute, Levi and Jasper would somehow manage to meet and perform acupuncture again. To deal with the situation, they suggested that the director assign different guards to rotate shifts, because everyone was already worn out from working nonstop day and night. The director rubbed his forehead in frustration because he also had no perfect solution. After doing some quick calculations, he realized that the hospital simply did not have enough personnel to control the situation effectively. Eventually, he wondered aloud if perhaps it would be easier to just place the two of them together in the same room and monitor them both at once. Jasper excitedly told the director that he had finally found someone who was willing to let him practice acupuncture on them without complaint. The director ultimately placed both of them in room 1666, giving Jasper a stern warning that they must live peacefully together and not cause trouble or disturb the other patients. At one point, the director accidentally muttered that if the dangerous Jasper somehow killed Levi by mistake, the hospital's problem might solve itself. The employees around him were horrified by such words, forcing the director to quickly step back and claim he never meant any real harm. One of the staff members nervously asked whether the two boys should still be separated just to be safe. But the slightly mischievous director waved his hand dismissively and said there was no need. When Levi finally woke up, Jasper eagerly told him the news. The director had officially allowed them to stay together in the same room, meaning they no longer had to sneak around secretly to meet. Both of them were delighted by this arrangement, realizing that they could now continue studying and practicing together without anyone constantly interfering. Filled with excitement and loyalty, the two boys made a heartfelt promise that they would always remain best friends no matter what happened in the future. But in the present moment, tears were streaming uncontrollably down Levi's face. He held Jasper tightly in his arms, his voice trembling with deep sadness and desperation. Through his tears, Levi begged Jasper again and again to wake up. In his heart, he believed Jasper would never deceive him, and he refused to accept that Jasper might truly be gone. Jasper lay on the ground, surrounded by blood. Suddenly, his weak and painful voice echoed faintly. He asked whose footsteps he could hear and demanded to know who had dared to hurt him. Crying out in agony, he desperately called Levi's name. A series of strange, broken sounds followed, almost impossible to understand. Then everything became completely silent. Jasper's body stopped moving, though his eyelids twitched slightly. At that moment, Levi suddenly heard the system announce that Jasper's vitality was slowly being restored and that he was beginning to regain consciousness. Hearing this filled Levi with overwhelming joy. As the system's voice faded away, Jasper slowly opened his eyes. Looking around in confusion, he softly called out Levi's name. Levi smiled with deep relief and satisfaction. He told the stunned Jasper that he had always believed in him and knew he would never deceive him. The system calmly added that this situation was not about deception at all, it was simply about faith. The system then advised its owner to remain more rational. It pointed out that Jasper had literally died and returned to life, which clearly meant he was no ordinary person. Even a powerful system like itself had misjudged him. The system complained that dealing with these two strange individuals was exhausting. It warned that continuing like this might cause system instability and immediately began performing a self-diagnosis. Meanwhile, Jasper sat there in a daze for several moments. Suddenly, Jasper remembered something and became indignant. Earlier, he had told Levi that someone had kicked him so hard that it hurt terribly. Jasper quickly rushed forward and hugged Levi while complaining loudly about the pain. He begged Levi to avenge him. Levi calmly pointed toward the lifeless bodies of the demon copies nearby and explained that he had already killed the creature many times to get revenge for Jasper. The rooster stood nearby, narrowing his eyes as sweat dripped down his feathers. In his heart, he silently thanked every god he knew that the terrifying man had not died. Because if that madman Levi had truly lost control, the rooster was certain he might have destroyed him as well. Jasper's eyes moved quickly as he searched around for the one-eyed man, wondering if he was still safe. While the others were distracted, the rooster quietly slipped away to deal with the corpses left behind for the Demon King. He worried that if those two terrifying people noticed him, the Demon King might not even have a body left to bury. Working quickly, the rooster used his wings to dig a large hole in the ground before carefully burying the cockroach-like body inside. Jasper then enthusiastically approached the one-eyed man and offered to heal him using acupuncture. The one-eyed man stared at Jasper in disbelief, unable to understand how he had survived such a powerful attack from the demon. Levi tried to reassure the one-eyed man, encouraging him to trust Jasper. He insisted that Jasper was actually very strong and might really be able to cure him. However, the frightened one-eyed man refused, clearly too scared to take the risk. Meanwhile, the rooster continued digging and glanced back at the burial site, nearly finished with his work. Suddenly, he noticed a small ant nearby. Seeing its strange white eyes, he wondered if the little creature was already dead. Without thinking too much about it, the rooster quickly pecked the ant, tossed it into the air, and swallowed it in a single gulp. The Demon King's soul was instantly filled with fury after witnessing this scene. Some of the surrounding evil spirits felt the moment was strangely familiar, remembering that many of them had ended up meeting the same fate. Meanwhile, the carefree rooster casually scratched the ground above the Demon King's grave. The rooster apologized awkwardly, explaining that he had not realized the evil man was even stronger than the Demon King. He never intended to bring the Demon King here just to die like this. After complaining and lamenting for a while, the rooster sighed deeply. Then he suddenly remembered something embarrassing. He had never actually seen the Demon King's true form, because he was merely a weak beast spirit. Hearing this, the Demon King's soul exploded with rage. His spirit flames burned fiercely as he shouted that the shameless rooster had literally eaten his true form alive. The rooster looked confused and wondered aloud what the Demon King's true form had even looked like. After all, he had always been too weak and insignificant to ever see such an important figure. The fox spirit nearby tried to calm the furious Demon King. It explained that although the rooster had accidentally devoured his true form and caused his death, there was no point continuing to dwell on it. Completely unaware of the trouble he had caused, the naive rooster continued standing there innocently. But suddenly, a cold shiver ran down his spine, as if he could faintly hear icy voices whispering curses at him from somewhere unseen. The rooster was overwhelmed with terror, completely unable to understand what was happening to him. Inside his body, violent energy surged like a volcano suddenly erupting deep beneath the earth. The power churned and boiled through his veins, burning and twisting in every corner of his body, bringing waves of unbearable, bone-deep pain that made him feel as if he might explode at any moment. The surrounding spirits originally believed the rooster was about to die and join them in the afterlife. Yet what they actually witnessed stunned them. Instead of collapsing quietly, the rooster rolled wildly across the ground, his body twisting and convulsing while he let out long, desperate screams filled with agony. To everyone's astonishment, events unfolded in a completely different direction than expected. The rooster did not perish. Instead, through sheer force of will and overwhelming power, he managed to break through the limits of his strength and raise his level once again. The one-eyed man watched the scene unfold with utter disbelief written across his face. Before his very eyes, the rooster completed its breakthrough and stepped into an entirely new realm of power, becoming a demon that had reached the terrifying national rank level.